Today I am here at Burton Constable in Yorkshire. As you can see, it's a glorious Elizabethan house. And I'll be visiting the family who still live in part of the house, but also viewing the highlights of their very extensive collection. Thank you so much for joining me here in the drawing room at Mapperton. I know from my own research into the lives of the Montagu family how absolutely fascinating it is to delve into the historic collections of houses like Mapperton. You can literally spend hours on a wonderfully exciting journey of discovery. And many historic houses open their doors to the public to share their amazing archives and treasures. On a recent visit to Yorkshire, I spent time at Burton Constable Hall, an absolutely beautiful Elizabethan house, home to the Constable family and their descendants for over 700 years. In 1992, the Burton Constable Foundation was established in order to safeguard the hall and collection for the future. And now the foundation, with the family, work to preserve and share the wonders of Burton Constable with the public. In the Great Hall, I met up with curator Philippa Wood to find out more about Burton Constable's past.
So this painting shows it in around 1690.
Okay.
So that's one of the key periods of the house. That's when Sir John Constable had built on it and expanded it. The earliest part of the hall was actually a tower, the North Tower, just there.
Okay.
And that's actually from the 13th century.
Ah.
But as the family gained power, they decided they needed a bigger house. So they just sort of expanded it as they went through. And so eventually you end up with this enormous structure, and the courtyards were there, I promise. That's not just artistic imagination, but
Incredible.
it is.
Absolutely incredible. And so who was within the family? Because I've read it's been in the family for, what, nearly 700 years, is that right?
Yes.
But who in the family decided to expand it? Was there one person in particular?
So yes, so that was Sir John Constable.
So he's sort of the one we can attribute to what we see more of today?
Yes, so he gained a lot of power from his father-in-law.
Okay.
And he became the Seigneur of Holderness, and he had all of this wealth and status in the county, and that's when he decided to really create this grand mansion for his family to live in and move here from nearby Howsham, where his family used to live.
Okay, fantastic. Burton Constable Hall is an Elizabethan gem, but I couldn't help but notice some Georgian features.
The Georgian side of things is from William, who inherited in the mid-1700s.
Okay.
His nose was out of joint because he had not inherited the title. His uncle, the 4th Viscount Dunbar, died without children, so it came through a cousin and then on to William. And so this, we think, was sort of William in a sense saying that he was still powerful and wealthy even though his family lost the title. So he completely redid the entire parkland, the entire house in more of a Georgian style.
Right.
Hence you get that door you just walked in, which used to be in the next door room, but it was moved to the centre to create Georgian symmetry.
Right.
Believe it or not, the entire house was painted sort of an ochre white colour.
No.
Yes. So William really did create an awful lot of changes to this house.
Yes, incredible. And those changes, what we're seeing today, have stayed then throughout, after the Georgian period, throughout sort of the 19th century. There haven't been too many other changes.
Not too many big structural changes. When the Victorians came in, everything was gilded. Everything was bright and repainted and reupholstered, and everything was wonderful. And we get a lot of ball furniture from that period, but a lot of the Georgian stuff does remain.
Does remain, right.
And to be honest, a lot of the Victorian gilding has since disappeared under further repaintings. Apparently at some point it became seen as unfashionable.
Yes.
But you will see when we go into the next room that we've still got some very bright colours courtesy of the 1970s family, some of whom I believe you're going to be meeting the family of today.
Yes. Isn't that fascinating? I see it in almost every single historic house I visit, each generation making their mark on the building. Today, Burton Constable is preserved and maintained by the Burton Constable Foundation.
So the foundation took the house on in 1992, so we're a charitable trust.
Yes.
But the family still lease the south wing, they're still trustees of the foundation, and our ethos is very much that we want to restore and retain everything, every part of the hall's history, and so the family are still very much a part of that.
Fantastic. There are over 30 rooms overflowing with family treasures and memories. I could not wait to take a closer look.
Yes, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. Oh, tremendous, absolutely tremendous. So this is
the staircase hall.
right.
So this is the room where everyone either loves or hates the colour scheme. There's very little any in between.
I love it.
I love it too.
It's because it's a showstopper. You walk in and you can't help but just pause. It makes you look. That's what it does.
Absolutely.
So it makes you look. So tell me a little bit about this room.
Believe it or not, it's actually one of the later areas of the house to be built. This was one of William's additions, and its cantilevered staircase is phenomenal.
Right.
And it was actually painted this colour in the 1970s by Gay Chichester Constable, so it's one of our more recent colour schemes as well.
Yes.
But it's an absolutely phenomenal space. It's got some really lovely pieces of the collections in it. So it's got the Erard piano from the 1800s, which was a phenomenal piece even in its time. It was one of the best pianos they made. And then Lady Rosina, when she got it, decided it wasn't grand enough and sent it away to be gilded in Hull. So it's a wonderful collections piece.
And absolutely stunning paintings, and look at the gilt frames. It is very
Yes,
gilded.
absolutely.
And that's why I think I love this sort of, bright lemon sunshine color.
Yes, I know. I mean, it sets the room off beautifully, doesn't it?
It does
Although,
make me smile.
I agree. Of course, in the 19th century, all of the banisters were gilded.
Were they?
Yes, the cornices were gilded. Everything. They brought in Binks from Hull and just decorated everything. So it would have been you can imagine how colourful it would have been.
Yes. I mean, with the sofas in here, it still has this, in one sense, a sense of a comfortable place to sit down.
And that's something that the foundation really works on, is to try and make this place feel like home, which is why we're so glad that the family are still very much involved in the work that we do.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I'm glad you kept the color. It does. It makes me smile when I come in here. So where are we heading to next then?
So we're going up the main stairs, and we're going to go to the long gallery, which is much more Elizabethan appearance, even though, like the rest of the house, it was hugely renovated in the 18th and 19th centuries.
That was absolutely exquisite. And the long gallery. Yes?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Unmistakably, isn't it?
Well, the ceiling is, so period-wise, this dates back to?
17th century.
17th century.
So this is one of the older parts of the house. This is actually a really fascinating room because, of course, it's a typical long gallery in that it could be used for exercise when the weather was inclement and the ladies could show off their fine gowns here. But it's also of particular interest to me because of this portrait here, which is Lady Margaret. And she was a famed recusant. She was always in trouble with the Queen for hiding priests and not giving up her Catholic faith.
Right.
So much so that eventually her son had to write a document telling her where she could and couldn't go in the house because he wanted to save the rest of the family from getting in trouble should the worst come to pass. So we know that Lady Margaret was given permission to walk up and down the long gallery, which always makes me particularly fond of this room, even when you take away how beautiful it is and the spectacular frieze at the top.
Yeah. The frieze is spectacular, but can I just ask, when was the frieze installed here?
That would have been done in the 19th century when this room was very much in use. So this bay here used to be used as a theatre, which is why we've now got some of the theatre costumes and some of their theatre flats in here, just to sort of set the scene.
Yes.
And then as we go on further down, there's another big bay that would have been used for music. So you'd have had a piano there and a harp and various other musical instruments. So this has always been in use, right from the Tudor period, right up until the 19th century. It would have been where people gathered. It would have been a real social place, a place for first of all exercise and then music and entertainment.
Yes.
So it would have been really a phenomenal place. Oh, and we do have a chair that was used by Her late Majesty Queen Victoria.
No.
So the family was actually of sufficient standing that when Queen Victoria did visit Hull, it was actually the family who loaned her pieces for her hotel room. So it was the Clifford Constable's silverware that was sent to the Queen's bedroom to be used by her during her visit. There are newspaper reports that say that she was going to come here on a hot air balloon, but I'm not sure how realistic that was.
Right. Well, you know, it's always a good story to tell. That's what I always think. When you have these wonderful historic houses, it's about how many stories that you can tell and, you know, whether or not they're true or not.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know what is extraordinary about this room, though, as you said, it was, you just said that it was a very much used room right on, through, even to today. If you think about it, it's being used because there's visitors coming through, which is wonderful, and learning about, of course, the history of Burton Constable. But I think as the American in me, anytime I see long galleries, I almost can't believe that it was used for exercise. But that's what, going up and down, especially here in England when the weather many times isn't fantastic.
Yes, I believe it's 22 times up and down equals a mile. So it has been counted.
Oh, really?
Yes.
22 times up and down equals a mile. Oh, I should challenge myself. Have you done that before, Philippa? Have you?
No, but I know the guides sometimes do. If they're in here and it's a very quiet day, the volunteers will do that
go
just for their
times.
steps.
Each room you visit at Burton Constable has its own atmosphere and story to tell. In the 18th century, William Constable's passion for collecting resulted in an amazing Cabinet of Curiosities.
So this is all William Constable's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay, so William Constable, the Georgian, who we see a lot of his work as far as in the fabric of the building, also as a collector?
Yeah, absolutely. So he once described himself as a virtue. He gives a long list of his accomplishments that include astronomy, gardening, science. It's similar to a modern Van de Graaff generator. So it would have harnessed static electricity.
Oh my goodness.
And he was doing a lot of electrical experiments in his house to the extent that he nearly blew it up at one point because he was doing some experiments with John Arden in the Long Gallery, and all of a sudden there was a big flash and a bang and some smoke. And we were quite lucky he didn't set the house on fire, if we're entirely honest. But no, he collected everything from geology to scientific instruments, telescopes, you name it. He was a typical gentleman of the Enlightenment. He just wanted to understand the entire world. He was a natural philosopher, to use their terminology, and he wanted to know everything. A lot of this stuff William would have learned about or collected on his grand tours of Europe.
Yes, of course, it was everybody did a grand tour. I mean, if you were powerful and, you would go on the grand tour to discover the world. Historic houses are full of surprises, but I couldn't quite believe it when Philippa showed me one of the highlights of the collection: the skeleton of a 58-foot sperm whale.
So we affectionately know this whale as Constable Moby. It is, amazing enough, the only real-life whale that appears in the book Moby Dick, in as much as it was stranded on the seashore not far from here in 1825.
Right.
So Clifford Constable decided to rescue it. About 10 years later, he finally got around to doing something with it and put it on iron mountings in the parkland, and you can still see the iron mountings leaning against the wall today.
Right.
It was a sensation. You got Victorian tourists coming from all over the place. You got scientists such as a gentleman called Beale who wrote a book on whales, and he described it in intricate detail. We think he was a bit inventive with some of the facts, in that he described the ribs opening and closing like a fan, and we've no idea how they would have managed to do that.
No.
But either way, it came to the attention of Herman Melville, and he actually pretty much copied and pasted this, so much for plagiarism, into Moby Dick. So we have the only whale that's mentioned in Moby Dick that actually existed in real life.
So it's in here now, and are people coming to see this maybe as much as they did during the Victorian era, or do you want to do something with it? Because now it's obviously been taken away and it's here housed and stored, but for the public to see as well.
So we're really hoping that at some point in the not too distant future we'll get some money to make this room a better display room for it, and we will actually remount it on an on a metal structure, so that it looks once again like it's like kind of swimming in the sea.
Yes. Well, that would be fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary, though. I mean, I've definitely never seen a whale skeleton before, much less the one from Moby Dick. Visiting Burton Constable Hall is the most wonderful historic journey. From the beauty and drama of the staircase, hall, and long gallery, to the incredible Cabinet of Curiosities. But at its core, Burton Constable has always been a family home. And the family still retain apartments in the South Wing, where I met Rodrika Straker and her son Jack. I'm in the private part of the house. I feel very honored right now. So thank you very much. And it feels very much like the private part, the home. And it is a bit of a contrast from sort of coming from the long gallery, if you like, into here. But this was the entire house. Burton Constable was your home when you were growing up, is that right?
It was. This was, to be fair, this was always the private side of the house, because when you have, as you know, a house open to the public, you have to have a little bit of you time and family privacy. And this was always the private side. And this room was the converted kitchens when my grandfather moved back here. They were, the house was requisitioned during the Second World War by the army, and the family moved out in the 20s due to not being able to keep it up. Family moved out to a smaller house for about 25, 30 years, and then back in the 50s, my grandfather moved back in and converted this wing for himself and his wife and my father's parents, and this was the kitchens, but it's a really lovely family home. Yeah, it really is. The sort of back part of it, and we're really lucky. Actually, to have had that privacy. When I was growing up, we were open to the public all the time, and it's all I can ever remember. And this was the proper retreat. You could run back in when you were scared by something or just overwhelmed by the amount of people who came for big occasions at weekends. When there was always a function on. Right, always. There were always people here milling about. And that, of course, was caused by, after the Second World War, many of these homes, as you just mentioned, Burton Constable, same situation, was requisitioned. They come back to these homes, these historic house homeowners, they're in such a state, but also they've lost their staff, they have death duties, they have taxes, and that's when we really start to see this decline of the country house, these historic houses, because the owners, and I suspect your father was the same way, they had to start thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to repair the roof or restore the painting or the piece of furniture that's been in the family and needs to be preserved? These historic house homeowners started to open up their house to the public. And is that what your father felt he had to do? Very much so. He inherited here in 1963, my grandfather died, and my grandfather had come from a sort of the typical Edwardian-born, been through many wars, thought about nothing else. Everything else was trivial compared to the life and death existence that they'd lived. And when the family moved back, I mean, Burton Constable had been neglected effectively, much loved but neglected through not being able to afford to do anything with it, and also, as you say, there was no workforce, nobody was around. Death duties, double death duties in some cases. Had been neglected for about 50 years, and it had really deteriorated. So in 1963, when my father inherited, and my mother and he had been married about 6 months,
Oh my goodness.
They tried to offer it to the National Trust, couldn't afford to take it on. It wasn't viable, as you'd call it, I suppose.
Right.
So they couldn't give it away. They really couldn't. And that's when they thought, that's it, we're going to have to start to be creative. So they went to see Julie Montagu, all of the houses that are just newly opened,
yes,
with great ideas. Do we want to have a zoo? Do we want to have a historic car collection? Do we want to have, what do we want to
right.
have? We're an hour east of everywhere. And where can we glean our interest? And it was really on the ground, weekends with interests like custom car rallies and traction engine rallies and country fairs. And that brought in 40, 50, 60,000 visitors a year, but notably only about 10, 15% of those ever went through the house. And it was, my parents recognised that it wasn't the house that was attracting them, but it was they that needed to be attracted in order to keep the house going and to begin the programme of restoration.
Right.
And that brought a big government grant to restore the roof. And that's really where the tipping point came in the 70s, where it became potentially viable.
Right.
And they said, right, we are going to do this thing. And they worked for 30 years. Hardly took a holiday. Didn't really look up, I think, until my mother died in 1989. And then my father couldn't really cope because he'd run out of steam, ideas.
Well, and he lost his sort of lifelong partner, and it sounds like they were much a team, very much a team, doing this together.
They were, and they'd opened up to functions and weddings and you know.
Started a band, didn't they?
They started a band in the 60s called the Hullabaloos, and they took that to America. They tried everything, literally everything. And you're absolutely right.
So many historic houses needed to adjust to post-war Britain, and homeowners had to be inventive, with many opening their doors to the public. Burton Constable survived by the ingenuity of Rodriguez's parents. But after the death of her mother in 1989, change became inevitable.
And so my father said, we must keep the collections of Burton Constable, because that which remains here does so simply because nobody's sold it. The house is a collection of you know, historic amalgamations of families.
Yes.
And that is fascinating in its own right, and everything that Philippa talks about is lots of generations of constables, but also whom they married, bringing in various different elements of those families. And so there's a proper story, a family genealogy story, which is evidenced by all the collections. So Dad always said, I do not want to sell the collections. This is the one thing that is telling the story. And then to keep the family in it, because they felt that that was the most important living history.
Absolutely.
As an educational tool.
Yes.
And sort of conserve the living as well as the artifact within it.
To secure Burton Constable's long-term future, in 1992, the Burton Constable Foundation was established. With this arrangement, Rodriguez's father did all that he could to ensure the long-term survival of the hall and its collection. And with part of Burton Constable remaining a family home, the living history continues.
It was such a relief for my father, because then it wasn't going to be a burden, what he considered to be an unachievable goal for Jack, who was by then 2. But he'd already claimed.
He saw the potential.
Right. Of course he did.
You're a remarkably precocious child.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So he, in one sense, had insight. He felt that, okay, this is going to be the best for the family and for future generations. Because you are still here, you're living here, as you so perfectly pointed out, and that's what I think is what's wonderful about these historic houses, and we're all, you know, most of us living in historic houses are a part of the historic houses, the organization, because it's about the living history. It's the history that has existed in your case for 700 years. You're still here. And yes, the public can enjoy it as they should, but you're able to then continue with your memories that will be passed on to your children and children, and those stories can still be told. It didn't stop with your father.
No.
It's wonderful. I mean, I, of course, had a fantastic walk around, and just to see the history then, but also the living history now, and having, you know, Jack here. And
Well, I think it's very important to have some guiding principles of sort of family values in terms of where you want to go, but you've got to move with the times. You know, you can't sort of just try one thing and say, well, that's what we're going to do for the next 50 years. It's been very interesting for me, 'cause, as Mum said, you know, Grandpa was always thinking about a few generations in the future, and I've grown up knowing I've been sort of tied into this place since day one, and it's been really interesting seeing Mum and Grandpa through the 1990s and 2000s, because they were obviously the family trustees, keeping a hand on the tiller, you know, for the first 20 years of the foundation's existence. And then I think from my end, I've been involved very much on the fringes for sort of many years, and then more actively probably in the last 5 or 6 years. So it's really been fascinating to have these two very inspiring forebears, you know, in my lifetime to look up to. And when I was in the fun park, because I moved up in September last year, so I've been in position, I suppose, for what, 6-8 months.
not very long.
Not very long, no.
Such a quick learner. It's unbelievable.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, but
It's terribly important for the next generation to just segue in really quickly, but also very, you know, very enthusiastically, because the lesson from Burton Constable or any of the other historic houses that have made it through the sort of night of hell, relatively, is never give up, and you're much better placed if you're in occupation and you're indentured.
That's right.
To be able to see the point of why you're doing this, and what will come if you really want it to happen.
You look at the outside of these houses, you look at the inside of these houses, and you have to make a decision. Am I going to give it my all, or am I just going to sort of, you know, occasionally just let it sit, do its thing, and when it needs to be done, something needs to be done. And I think some people are in two minds about that. I'll just sort of let it carry on and function as it is, and great. But I think the three of us can collectively say we're not in that camp to just let it just carry on and function as it is. We want it to continue for future generations, and that does mean thinking out of the box. And you're going to get some things right, you're going to get some things wrong, but hopefully you get more right than you get wrong, and so that it can carry on, and it is looking to the future.
a slight side story. But my room is up there, and it's next to one of the more, I say, more haunted rooms in the house. And people often ask, "God, it's really scary being in the house all on your own." I was like, and because probably about once a month or something, I wake up in the middle of the night and hear a door slamming next door, which is pretty unusual because it's it's alarmed and locked up and everything. And people go, "That must be terrifying." I said, "Well, not really, because it's been a pretty happy house for 700 years, and we haven't had any sort of murders or anything." And it's probably an ancestor yet.
Yes.
It's probably an ancestor. And I was thinking, well, rather reassuring, you know.
They're looking after you.
Exactly. And the fact that they haven't haunted me means that it's not going too badly wrong so far. So
no.
I think it's a good canary in the mine there. So if things start getting thrown about, that's when to start worrying. But it's that I think being able to tap into that sort of long line of innovation and passion for a place is very important. As someone who lives here and wants to look forward to the next generations, but also for the perspective of marketing the house to the public, you have to have a story and a narrative. And I think that it's this rather mad family that's lived here for so long is the only thing that makes sense, really.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for your time. But I just want to say, here's to the future for you, Jack, and now that you've taken on the reins. You've only been here 6 to 8 months, but
Well, it's, I'd
wonderful.
say more of a joint venture at the minute.
But that's right. But you know,
But yeah.
it's the both of you together. It's wonderful, and it's taking what your mother has given you, shown you, and using that, and then moving it forward. So here's to the future of Burton Constable. It's in good hands.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
This time on American Viscountess, I enjoy summer sunshine in one of the most glorious historic gardens in Britain, Newby Hall in North Yorkshire. Welcome to the beautiful Italianate gardens here at Mapperton, and to a very special episode of American Viscountess. The enduring fascination and love the British have with their gardens is almost embedded in the national psyche. And it's clear to see here at Mapperton, but also at every historic house I visit across the UK. Recently, on a visit to North Yorkshire, I was fortunate enough to spend time in the stunningly beautiful historic gardens at Newby Hall, the home of our friends Richard and Lucinda Compton. Lovely to see both of you again.
Good to see you, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say that I brought the weather, because I don't think I did, but thank you, whoever.
Oh, it's
decided.
always like this in Yorkshire.
I believe you. I'll try to believe you there. But, you know, what's so wonderful about coming here to Newby is, of course, not only the house, this wonderful backdrop, but people come here because your gardens are so well known. I mean, you've won award after award for these gardens. I've walked through them a bit just to get to this bench. But can you tell me just a little bit more about the history of your gardens here?
Yeah, well, originally when the house was built, there was some very formal gardens, as you would expect at the time. That's 1690. But really the gardens that you see now are my grandfather's creation. Right. And when he inherited, he said that he'd inherited a picture with no frame. So a lovely house, yes, which is Newby, but without a garden. And so he set about creating that frame for his picture.
Oh my goodness.
And that was in the 20s. So you get this formal garden running down to the river with arguably the longest double herbaceous borders, certainly in Britain.
Yes, absolutely.
And then formal compartments set off it, rather like rooms, you know,
yes,
of a house.
That was his vision then,
yeah,
is that right? And how many years did that, because these gardens are vast.
He did about 50 years,
He
yes.
was gardening here for 50
Yeah,
years.
so he designed it, and he realised that occasionally in Yorkshire you get a strong southwest wind. And then he made that wonderful decision in about 1930 that his design could actually get to fruition. And that's when he turned the first turf.
And then you've got the Second World War, and during that period, houses weren't open to the public then, really, right? So he...
No, well, this was actually reserved for the royal family.
Oh my goodness.
It was one of the 3 houses that was reserved for the royal family should the Germans invade.
Oh my goodness. So he then had to prepare for that as well.
Yeah. And there were letters. There was a famous moment when the general in charge of the North wrote to my grandfather, who was a mere major,
right,
and said, we're going to requisition the house. And he said, I'm so sorry, sir, but I think you ought to refer this to Buckingham Palace.
Oh my
So Newby
goodness.
was never requisitioned by the army. Yeah.
So because Newby was never requisitioned, because it was on hold, if you like, for the royal family, just in case, that you were quite lucky then, because of course the house was
lucky.
Intact and the gardens stayed intact.
They stayed intact, but of course there was nobody to do the gardening.
Right.
Because they were all fighting.
Yes.
So it was very much put on sort of hold.
Yep.
And indeed the lawn in front of the West Front was growing vegetables for the war effort. and there were pillboxes, with
Yes.
guns in and all that sort of stuff. So it was a very different place, obviously.
Yes, yes.
During the war.
Right.
And then after the war, my grandfather then went back to trying to get it back together again.
Right. We do see so many historic houses opening up to the public after the Second World War due to, of course, the taxes that were levied. And it was almost as if the hand was forced on many of these historic houses, which is a blessing for, of course, visitors like me and the public. And, and it's wonderful to be able to showcase the house and the gardens. But so your grandfather did open up to the public.
Yes, he did. And he had a tragedy because my grandmother died. She got cancer and she died very young. And so he was, unhappy in things. And it was my father who said, well, why don't you open to the public? Because it gave him a raison d'etre and everything else. And he literally used to park the cars. I mean, he would get his handkerchief out and wave at somebody and say, no, you're parking in there. So he was doing everything. And then he sold his plants in a little plant stall in the car park. And so we're actually celebrating 75 years of being open to the public this year.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
Looking at the gardens now, I know, Lucinda, you are head gardener. Let's be honest here, right?
You'll meet the head gardener.
I know I'll meet the head gardener.
Brilliant head gardener, Lawrence.
But it's a real passion
Garden
of yours.
curator, would you call yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, it has become a real passion. I was very fortunate that Rick's father, Robin, taught me a lot about gardening, and I had 10 years with him,
Right.
and showing me around, teaching me about the plants. And he was a phenomenal horticulturist. He had a royal medal from the RHS,
Right.
Victoria Medal.
So you were able to spend 10 years with him just
Learning, yeah.
That is incredible.
And then when he died, I obviously had to sort of take on the role of curator.
Of curator, yes. No, I was only joking, head gardener. I know you've got one, but you are. Listen, I found you this morning in there. Yes, yeah, exactly. Gardening away.
I think gardening can become so addictive or obsessive, and I have to say I absolutely love it. And it's not only the creativity, but also actually I enjoy weeding and pruning and
Yes.
The maintenance roles.
Yes, and it's sort of within you. You're able to go into that present moment. We all talk about staying in the present moment, and forgetting about the past and not worrying about the future. And gardening has that ability to do that because you really need to be focused on what you're doing, but also you're in a beautiful setting and you're in nature. And
it's so beautiful.
yeah, it's so
lovely.
beautiful. So you are then, of course, open to the public. You have been, as you said, you're coming up to 75 years. But you've also, the two of you, have seen this garden, expand under your own wings. Is that right? You have made expansions and additions to it.
Well, we've certainly done adaptions.
Yes.
I mean, and Lucinda's in the middle of doing the restoration of the rock garden and then replanting the main borders.
Yes.
Which was a very brave decision to make, but and the palette colours have changed from what they were to now a much softer palette, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think just sort of one last question is, England and Britain, you are known for these spectacular gardens, and I guess just maybe a bit of the history in one sense. What is this fascination that I think, looking at the British people with their gardens, because it's hard to find another country that has this love so much.
I think we have a great climate for gardening. So we're because of the Gulf Stream, we're warm enough, and we're always fairly wet. So there's this wonderful climate. We're not too far north or too hot.
Right.
So we can grow a whole range of plants. And the other thing is the gardens have evolved over centuries, haven't they?
Yes.
So, Rich was talking about this, the framework of this garden from 1690, and there was a house before that, and that's fairly typical of English country houses. They've evolved over centuries, and so you've got mature trees, amazing ancient walls.
And when we do get a very dry summer, you get the outline if you look from the roof, you can get the outline of the old parterre
Right.
in the grass. It's quite
Of the
extraordinary.
1690?
Yes.
Incredible.
Well, it's probably, that's mainly
Later,
the
it's a bit
Victorian.
later.
Maybe the Victorian
Yeah.
one, but yeah, you
Yeah,
can get the
but
parterre of the
but you get-
Victorian.
Exactly. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing, incredible. And it just then goes to show you sort of how these gardens have evolved, and with each generation, you're constantly thinking, well, what can I do to the garden? And it's what you are doing, of course, is you're, as you say, adapting and maybe bringing back to life
Yep.
the rock garden.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which looks stunning.
Well, I can't wait to see it. So, Lucinda, you're about to give me a little tour. Is that right?
I'd love to, Julie.
Well,
yeah, that'd be a
brilliant.
pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. Lucinda, this is the view. Whenever I think of
Yes,
Newby in the gardens.
This is the famous herbaceous borders,
Yes.
which are 172 metres long, and they're designed to be at their best for July, August and September, and we replanted them in 2014.
Oh, you
So
did?
Huge
All of-
job.
oh
all
my
of
gosh,
them. We
huge
did
job.
it entirely in-house, dug everything out and started again. So, and we put this netting across, which you can see,
Yes.
to protect the plants from the wind.
Okay.
And Newby, this is the sort of main north-south axis, and then the statue walk up there is the main east-west. And then off them, there are about 14 or 15 rooms or individual gardens.
Wow.
Yeah, throughout the garden.
That is incredible. So this job here, 2014, this, how long did it take to do this, and who was curating this?
So it took us in all about 4 years, because it took us about 2 years of research, visiting nurseries, buying in the plants in 9-centimetre pots. We laid them out in our nursery area and bulked them up, planned the garden, and it was designed by Mark, our then head gardener, Louise, who looked after the borders at the time, and myself. So the three of us together. And then we planted it all in-house.
Oh
and
my
we did it
goodness.
over 2 winters.
Did you?
And it was really a huge job.
Of course. The herbaceous borders are breathtaking. Stretching down to the river, they give the most glorious view back to the hall, which over the centuries has been designed and remodeled by some of the greatest British architects, including Sir Christopher Wren in the 1690s and Robert Adam in the 18th century. At Newby, the house and gardens complement each other. All around, there are glimpses of the hall framed by trees and plants, and it's absolutely stunning. And to create and tend to all of this beauty, I think you'll be so surprised as to how many gardeners it takes.
I act as curator, helping with weeding and decision making
Right.
primarily. Then we have Lawrence, our head gardener, who I hope you'll meet. And we're a team of 6.5 gardeners at the moment. And probably a more institutional garden of our size might have 30 and
Yes.
maybe 100 volunteers.
Yes.
So we have a very, very active, very professional team, and they manage incredibly well.
That is, and you're right, that, I mean, considering the scale of this garden here, 6.5 gardeners
Yeah.
is not, and then especially when you look back in time.
Between the walls here, they had 22.
Right,
Yeah.
22 gardens. Wow.
But the garden was less intensive at that date,
Okay.
I think. Newby now is really a garden for all seasons, you know, and we're open 6 months of summer, but there's an enormous amount of interest. You know, every week it's changing, and
Yes,
there's something
of course.
exciting.
Gardens change within the seasons, and
Yes.
you can see them constantly evolving.
Yes, and you're always, every winter you might lose a tree, or, you know, and they need regenerating.
Lucinda, you know, I could kind of call you sort of curator of the gardens, yes? And do you spend quite a bit of time out here because I saw you earlier.
I have various other roles.
Yes,
So, I fit the gardening in around them.
Okay.
And often that might be weekends or evenings.
Yes.
If a beautiful summer's evening, I might be out here, you know, till 9 or 10 at night. I absolutely love it, and it's so peaceful in the garden.
Yes.
And during the weekends, it's a fun time for me to actually meet visitors and hear their stories. And they tell me problems in their garden. And, and I love that too.
As Lucinda mentioned, the dedication of Newbie's gardening team means that whenever you visit, the gardens are putting on the most wonderful displays. I met up with head gardener Lawrence Wright to explore the rose garden. Lawrence, it's a real treat that I'm with the head gardener here at Newbie. I mean, because these gardens are sensational. I mean, they're vast.
They are vast.
And you have a big job.
A very big job, 25 acres of formal garden for essentially 6 full-time people.
Right.
So it is a lot of work.
Yes.
But, you know, the reward is all around us.
Yeah, it is. And how long have you been here then as head gardener?
So about 18 months.
Okay.
So still very new to the role, and it takes such a while to get your head around a garden on this scale.
Right.
And this importance as well. You know, it's a couple of seasons of work to just understand how you fit into a space and how you can work with what is already there and how you can take it forward so that it's always getting better for the future.
Yes, exactly. And when you know, since you're relatively new, so to speak, 18 months, when you come in and see a garden of this size, I mean, does your imagination and creativity sort of just go, whoa, what do I want to do first?
Yeah, it's exactly that. There's so much that when you walk around, you think, oh, you know, this particular view is beautiful, you know, that bit maybe we can tweak, and the temptation is to run straight into it.
Right.
And actually, you need to pull yourself back, tell yourself to get a grip. You need to sort of understand the space you're in before you then start making decisions that sort of take the garden forward.
Yes.
So this is the rose garden, and has been a rose garden for the last 40 years. And actually, it's a beautiful space, and everyone loves roses. The visitors love roses,
Yes.
and we're just about to start. You know, the first blooms are just coming out.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So we had an issue in here where actually the majority of our visitors come in the summer holiday, and they come into the rose garden expecting to see beautiful roses.
Right.
And actually, they can be disappointed in August. So we've gone through underplanting, we've put in a load of mid to late summer flowering perennials that actually bolster when the rose garden drops in terms of rose colour, all of the herbaceous comes through, and added a few modern shrubs into it. So it's balancing how the garden, the traditional feel of the garden, but also making it move forward and be more present in the garden as a whole.
Yes, all year round, and especially because this garden is open to the public.
Yes.
So it's being able to sort of smell, see for extended periods.
Exactly, and you know, it's right in the heart of the garden, so it's got to work hard for its place.
Yes.
So now we've extended that season of interest over many months rather than 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, wonderful. And you know, also when we come to gardens, I think as a visitor, we're blown away, but because it's so beautiful and the scents incredible. But your job is not just when the gardens are open to the public.
No.
It is all year round, and almost in one sense, so it's almost that off season where you're working the hardest.
Yeah, we often have visitors say to us, oh, it must be really nice in the winter because, you know, we're not here. And actually we do all of the dirty work in the winter, we do the hard work in the winter.
Yes.
But also we're thinking, you know, sometimes a year in advance, 18 months, 2 years in advance. It's not just what you see in front of you day to day, it's the process of getting to where you want to be in, you know, 5 years' time. Sometimes starts now.
Of course it does, because, you know, it's not that these plants need nurturing, they need time to get to that maturity state, and that's just not an overnight process.
It's one of those things that, you know, interiors are a classic example. It's very instant. You go and buy a picture, you buy a vase, you put it down, it's done. With this, we start with a seed or a cutting, and it can take years before you get the desired effect, really.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, listen, Lawrence, sensational job. I've walked around and it is stunning what you have done. And this rose garden, oh gosh, incredible. As we saw with the rose garden there, the 25 acres of gardens at Newby are divided into little rooms. And in each, you're met with this gorgeous tapestry of different atmospheres, colors, and textures.
This one on the left is looking very colourful today.
I mean, you can't help but smile when you see this.
Yes, exactly. I think this is one of the most popular areas of the garden with our visitors. It's just a colour. It's like a sort of box of sweets or something.
Yes.
These are candelabra primulas from the Himalayas, and we've got wonderful collections of primulas throughout the garden. And these are Harlow car hybrids, and they do this every year without fail, and it's just a joy.
It's just a joy. And so
yes.
they're in one sense right now, I feel like they were in full bloom. Is that right? Or just about to be in?
Yes, and they carry on for a while
Yeah.
because the flowers keep coming up the stem.
Yes.
And,
So you have this sort of this color burst for
Yes,
quite a long
yes,
period.
and look at those,
Yeah,
you
look,
know,
I mean,
just,
absolutely.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
This actual garden was created by my father-in-law, Robin.
Okay.
So, and it's sort of in typical Newby fashion. We had a leak from the moat of water around the shop, which he'd put in, and somehow the water came down to here, and it was always boggy. And then a very big tree fell down, and so there was a huge clearing, and he said, let's have a water garden. So he then designed this rill of water with the little bridge and
Yes.
stones.
Oh my goodness. So he just, well, that's very clever thinking out of the
Yes.
box.
Exactly. He was a brilliant gardener.
Yeah. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And in the autumn, we've got some wonderful trees here. Most of these trees are spring flowering and then wonderful autumn colour.
So yeah, so again,
it's all
coming
year
to the
round.
garden,
Yeah.
you can see it change throughout the seasons, which is just wonderful. You know, we are having a conversation, but I can imagine somebody just walking through in silence,
Yeah.
hearing the bird song, hearing the water,
Exactly.
and of course,
Peaceful and
peaceful.
beautiful. And,
Yeah. So where are we entering into now?
So this is the rock garden, which was opened in 1914 by Richard's great-grandfather.
1914.
Just as the gardeners all went off to war. This is a Lebanon pergola that way.
It's
And
so lovely.
Here there are 22 beds with rocks brought from the Dales nearby, and this was designed by Ellen Wilmot, and who was a famous gardener at the time.
Right.
And it's we're halfway through restoring it.
Okay.
So on the right you can see beds that we've done,
Yes, yes.
and on the left ones that we're preparing,
Ah.
and we'll plant those in the autumn.
Right, okay.
Done.
This is wonderful. And what was the inspiration for having a rock garden? Was there...
Well, at the time, the people were starting to travel, and of course, the British particularly loved the Alps and alpine scenery, and I think it was the sort of Edwardian times, the first package holidays, and they were setting off and they started skiing and they went walking in the summer, and they fell in love with all of these sort of alpine plants.
Right.
And then they came back and they wanted their own rock garden at home. And so there were a lot of rock gardens were built in that Edwardian
Really?
era. And this is one of the biggest.
That is fascinating. you said that you're sort of restoring it, if you like.
Yes, I mean, since 1914, when of course the gardeners, the minute they opened it in August, they all went off to war.
Right.
And most of them didn't return. And so the garden, we think, from that date started to slide already.
Right.
And then it gradually sort of became a woodland garden, a rather shady woodland garden, with a lot of the existing little pines like that, would have been little rock garden pine, is now a champion tree.
Yes.
It's one of the biggest in the country. And then also a lot of trees had sown themselves in here, yews and what have you. And so we've cleared the trees, a lot of them, and now replanted with alpines.
With alpines, wonderful.
Himalayan poppies.
So this is another sort of pocket within these glorious gardens, and they are just sensational. But it's wonderful just to be able to contrast the difference from where we just were, the water garden, to here, the rock.
There's a very, very different feel here. And again, one of the most popular areas of the garden, especially with children who love all the paths.
Yes, yes.
And replanting has given us an opportunity for new plants that we haven't had before.
Yeah.
And that's very exciting.
And it's all very exciting. It's so wonderful, Lucinda, just what you've been able to continue to do and continue to create and evolve.
So these acres are obviously 100 years old. These extraordinary wellheads.
Extraordinary. Absolutely wonderful. The gardens at Newby are sensational, and I hope to return very, very soon. Every time you visit a garden, you see something new, and it's just the same here at Mapperton. The character and atmosphere of the gardens change with the seasons. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you back here very soon for another historic house and gardens visit. Bye, everybody. I'm so excited to be here at this magnificent historic house, Constable Burton, here in Yorkshire. And I'm just about to meet my really good friends, Darcy and Imogen Wyville. Welcome to the drawing room here at Mapperton. Although this room is part of the Tudor wing of the house, it does have the character of the 18th century with paneling and furniture of the Georgian period. So many historic homes that I visit are remodeled as fashions and architectural styles change over the generations. Recently, I visited the most beautiful Georgian country house in North Yorkshire, Constable Burton Hall. Home to the Wyville family since the 16th century, it was once an Elizabethan house, but reimagined in 1768. Hello. Hello. Come on in. Goodness. It's so wonderful to be here. And who's that?
That's our welcome committee. That's Minna.
It's so nice to see you. So nice to see you. So nice to see you.
Hi,
hello.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Welcome. Lovely, lovely day.
Thank you for bringing the sun just for me, right?
Amazing. Yeah, it's a proper Yorkshire day today. Welcome.
Gosh, it's so wonderful to finally actually be here. I know we've always had this plan, like I'm going to come and see you, and finally I'm in Yorkshire, which is brilliant with the sun and Minna.
What a joy. I know.
It's so beautiful.
She's the star of
The matriarch.
And look at, wow, I've got more of a welcoming committee right there.
That's Luna, and that's Stella at the back. Mother and daughter.
Yes. Luna is the mother, Stella's the daughter.
And there's a whippet running around
There's a
somewhere.
puppy somewhere.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Oh,
She's
goodness.
well done.
And 3 children.
And 3 children.
Children, yeah.
Right.
3 children, 4 dogs, and one old house.
And one old house. So tell me about this wonderful old house. Right.
Originally it was we think a medieval hunting lodge, and this house passed through from generations from the 1590s. The first big house was built here, which was Elizabethan in style. The family story goes that one of my descendants wanted to get some reparations made to that house. They went away to go and do a job in Scotland. They left plans with a young architect called John Carr of York, who's probably now one of Yorkshire's most famous architects, to get some reparations done on the house. And he came back a year and a half later, and he was on his horse being followed by his servants, and he said, "Where's my house?" And they came back and it had been demolished to the ground floor.
No.
Yeah. It was rebuilt.
A little miscommunication.
Yeah. So,
to put it mildly. Can you imagine that moment?
Right, and do you have a picture of the original house?
We do actually, yeah. This is the kit drawing here. So we think original house sits pretty much on the footprint of the old house.
Okay.
The lawn out there on the left-hand side is the large lawn out there. There were some formal gardens running down to the little stream, which is all back there. The lakes are behind the house here.
Right, and you still have the lakes.
They are there. Yeah. They're not octagons like that, but there is a lake there.
Yep.
So there's always a bit of artistic license in these drawings because they're trying to get everything into the landscape, so the topography is not spot on. However, the Lime Avenue, which is going up there, is still here. So that's what it looked like.
So then this was flattened or pulled down?
Yeah, basically.
And when
I
he
think
arrived...
literally the sort of the ground level foundation was here.
Yeah.
It was here.
And that was it.
That was it. So they decided to go around a major redesign on it. We're talking in the Georgian era.
Okay.
And of course, the style, which was the Palladian style, because the aristocracy of the time were going off to do the Grand Tour, and all these European influences were coming back to the UK, and so was the architectural side of that as well. So this house was then rebuilt in the Georgian style, finished in 1768, and we've been here as a family, before and ever since.
Oh my goodness. Constable Burton has the most intimate and relaxed atmosphere of almost any historic house I've visited. As soon as you arrive, you feel you're being invited into a loving family home. Its beautifully decorated and preserved interior is the result of years of hard work by Darcy and Imogen and Darcy's parents during their tenure at the Hall.
This house is in pretty good nick.
Yeah.
When my parents took it over, it was not in good nick. They were fairly young when they came up here. There'd been a lady who'd been living in the house as a sitting tenancy between my grandfather's death and my father taking over.
Right.
And so apparently the roof had holes in it and there was water damage in most of the rooms. She'd actually was just living in the drawing room, which she'd made into her apartment. And a lot of the works of art had been taken out and they'd been stored in the stables, badly stored in the stables. And so when my parents decided that they were going to come up and make a go of this, they had to set around doing a large renovation of the place.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. When Imogen and Darcy moved into the Hall in 2016, much of the major renovation work had been completed, but they were faced with modernizing this impressive Georgian building.
The sort of plumbing and the heating and
the less attractive
and
jobs.
All that kind of stuff. Which is
and the ones that nobody knows too much about, which is why it's always nice to say, we did this,
yes,
that,
we did
because it's invisible.
Right, so we took over Mapperton about the same time as you, so 2016, the two of you, and one of the first things we did that nobody sees is the copper piping.
Right. Yeah.
So got rid of all the lead piping and did the copper piping, but nobody sees that. And then we ended up doing a sort of a biomass boiler to heat it. It's all the stuff that people don't see.
Exactly.
But
right. Yeah, exactly. So we run the house off a biomass boiler.
Yeah.
We get the wood off the estate, and so sort of innovation of that kind of things is really important, actually.
Yeah.
And back in the day, these houses were completely self-sufficient in their own right anyway.
Exactly.
So we feel like we've gone on a bit of a journey, and we're doing the same with our water. We've got boreholes here, so we've got our own heat, we've got our own water. At some stage the technology is moving, and I'm sure we'll be able to do something with the electricity side of things as well.
As homeowners, we must innovate and do all that we can to make these historic houses adaptable and sustainable for life today and beyond. And I couldn't wait to explore and see how Imogen and Darcy have updated the Georgian interiors.
So this is the library in its modern guise. This is what this is. It's an after-dinner relaxing room, originally being the library. It would have been obviously for working and reading in. Now, this was the only room that when we renovated it, we changed the paint scheme in here because it would have been white as possible to lend lots of light so you could read via the natural light that was coming in. Funny story, the wallpaper's original.
Is it?
Victorian original.
Right.
I think it's called Strawberry Hill.
Strawberry Hill, yeah. It's also found in the Houses of Parliament. Well, Imogen came in with this paint palette, and I brought my parents up here, and it had been a very white room beforehand, and we walked in, and I came in here with my mum and dad, and I said, so what do you think? And they said, well, Darcy, it's very sex, drugs, and rock and roll, isn't it?
It's perfect.
Yeah, so
it's the perfect color scheme for this room.
So this room we're going to go into next is called the morning room, and in its current guise, it's actually my study.
Fantastic.
Which I share.
Do you share it with your husband?
I don't share with my husband.
I'm about the only person who's not allowed in here.
When we moved in, I did think that we might have, what they call a partner desk. Well, this is a partner desk, and I did wonder whether we might sit opposite one another, and then I quickly realised that was a terrible idea.
Right.
And that we might not be still here today if that was the case. But no, so this is where I sit and manage things. And ever since COVID, I share the space with my son, who this was his little homeschooling area, and he's retained it.
But also, it's really comfortable.
It's a beautiful room.
It's beautiful, and this color. Then, did you have consulting around that?
So all of these rooms that we're going to walk through now are all in the exact color scheme.
The 1768 color scheme, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
this is my kind of color.
Yeah, so this is a very beautiful colour that was actually mixed specifically for this house. And it's called Mallory Blue. And it's actually a sort of very pale blue undercoat.
Right.
And then stippled on with a wire brush into this sort of dark, and you can see the kind of variation in the colour. So as the natural light fades, the beautiful sort of evening glow of the lamps and the chandelier, there's actually a real warmth in this blue, which is, you wouldn't necessarily expect. And it really makes the gilding of the frames pop.
One of the John Carr sort of architectural designs was to have a thin line at the top of above the frieze and the ceiling. So that's meant to sort of draw your eyes up to the ceiling.
Wonderful. And I can see, of course, you use this room because dotted all around are sort of photographs, family, children. It's wonderful. And that's what's, I think, so fascinating about these historic houses that are privately owned, lived in, but of course, open to the public when they need to be, or for events. I can see you're having an event here. There's a big marquee outside, but that they're lived in. And so that the living history continues with us so that the next generation can tell stories about you. And that's what's so wonderful. It continues. It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
So often, as we get older, we really start to appreciate the history of our surroundings. So I asked Darcy, was he always aware of the historical value of his childhood home?
Even when you're kind of growing up in these places, you're not necessarily paying much attention to everything. And certainly that was in my case. And then when I came back from my job in London and I was starting to think about moving in here and living in here, and my father would do the house tours, and he's the sort of living, breathing historian of the family, and suddenly I realised that I had to get up to speed quickly, smarten up. And then, of course, from that, then the interest starts to come in the furniture and the paintings. And, we always say that we're just in these houses just to hold on to them or hand them on to the next generation. We're custodians of our time.
Yes.
One would like to think that you are going to move these houses on to the next generation. That's the goal, that's the dream.
Yes.
And, we're lucky, this house, even though, like lots of other houses, there have been moments of where it's been hanging on a thread.
Yeah.
And we've had to marry a cousin or two or done something like that in order to keep it together. It is still here. And they need to sing for their supper. They need to work. They have to put money into the coffers. The trade-off of living in one of these beautiful houses is that there is a second side of that, which is we have to make it work. We have to monetize that, and
of course.
That's just part of the deal.
That's how these historic houses are. I mean, they are survivors, but we've come into an era where gone are the days of they were surviving because there was a lot of staff here, and the people who are living on the estate sort of worked here, and this was in one sense their village. That was it. Yeah. We've completely evolved, times have changed, and in order to preserve these historic houses, we do need to have events. We do need to open up occasionally or all of the time, just depending, and weddings, whatever it is, to continue to fix
exactly.
the roof, or to look at the color palette and the colorway.
It is a great house for entertaining. We do a lot of we have a lot of private clients staying in the house, and I think that's one of the lovely things about this house is that the scale of it dictates the size of the party staying. So we don't do sort of vast weddings for hundreds, but the house is a really wonderful entertaining space. The dining room next door, that you'll get another feel for that. We use not like this, but we do use for breakfast, lunch and dinner as a family.
Do you?
Sunday lunch, we'll have lunch
brilliant.
in here. If it's just us as a small family, we'll sit at the table in the window. But this is where we have Christmas, this is where we have all of our family occasions. But again, these are the original Georgian colours. They're actually
I love
11,
the door.
there are 11 paint colours in this room.
11.
11. So you can see, the beading and the and the framework. So it's quite amazing. And actually, my father-in-law was the first one to go down this route in this room, and he wasn't convinced when he got presented with the colours. He thought it was a bit outrageous, the dark pink ceiling, and so he actually painted up a full panel before he committed.
Okay.
Just to be sure. And actually, it's such a success. Again, as the light dims, it's really, really atmospheric in the evening with the candles and the crystal and the silverware. So it's really magical.
And the furniture in here is original. This is a Gillow Imperial table. Gillow of Lancaster was one of the great furniture makers, used same sort of type at the time as Chippendale. We've got a lovely Gillow sideboard at the top here. These urns were actually they're lead lined and they're wine coolers. Very, very nice to have the original furniture here, and that's part of the journey of owning these houses. You pick up these nuggets and you speak to other people, and some people sometimes you just look at a table and you think it's a table. Actually, once you get to the history of it all and it becomes part of the fabric of the house.
Exactly, and the craftsmanship that goes into these pieces.
This is our inner hall, and obviously the wonderful cantilever staircase in here, and that job is to lead your eyes up to the roof. And so we've got these lovely demi-lunette windows that let in a sort of different angles of light during the day, and leading up to some of the bigger pictures in the house. These are sort of big, Reformation pieces, the 1540s, that kind of era.
Wow, how wonderful. But then, of course, you've got, you are living here, and what was wonderful to hear is that and I can see that you use all of these rooms.
Yeah.
Which is how these houses should be used.
Yeah.
It's really nice. I mean, obviously, some of the rooms where we've got some of the nicer pieces of furniture and things, we've had to put blue tack underneath things to stop balloons and bouncy balls and scooters.
No ball games in the house, darling.
No ball games in the house. But generally,
No
you know, you can't live in a house like this and be too fussy about, you know,
No.
kids and dogs and all that kind of wear and tear. It's just part of the fabric.
It's part of the fabric.
You know, and once in a while you can get in, you can give your place a lick of paint, and,
Yes.
and off you go again. So,
Yeah.
you know, we are, you know, very conscious that we don't want our children to be constrained by feeling like they're living in a monument.
Right.
They're
They
living.
really
they're,
don't.
they're at home.
I don't
I don't think they do. I don't get that feeling.
No, I don't think they do either.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for
All
this
right.
sort of whistle-stop circuit tour. I think it's, I mean, really wonderful. Darcy and Imogen have combined comfortable modern family life with Georgian splendor at Constable Burton. And that extends out into the park as well. Well, we're now leaving your beautiful house. Tell me where we're going.
So this is the Lime Avenue. This is one of my favourite places in the gardens. This was actually on the original Kip drawing, and led away to the, now leads up to our kitchen gardens. And the trees in here are over 400 years old. They're European limes. And this is a really magical time of year to come and visit them because it's like a sort of cathedral. They all meet in the middle. Obviously, avenues are very much part of the British landscape.
Yes.
And we're very lucky to have one. And you know, it just brings its own vibe, this place. You walk into it, everything dulls down, you get this wonderful dappled light coming through at this time of year. In the spring, this is all full of daffodils, and then we just let it go. So it's full of cow parsley and dock leaves and wild garlic and bluebells and cyclamen.
The smell is amazing.
And you walk in here and everything kind of just, it's a very sort of very cool part of the gardens. This was the start of the pleasure gardens. And when you get up to the top here, you are dropping into the forests and the trees and the really wild parts of the estate. So it's kind of formal and functional meets wild.
Yes,
and it's
exactly.
just a really lovely part
And
of it.
it's extraordinary though when this, because these are, you said what, 400 years old, is that
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
look at how they're perfectly spaced.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky to have them. And the forethought in the planting here, I mean, you can imagine you're going to plant this avenue, you're never going to see it. You know, when you plant it, it's going to be, I don't know, like it's going to get to like 10 meters in 50, 60 years. And here it is now, 400 years later, and it's probably now at its very, very best. So thank you to those that came before us. We are undertaking a big planting scheme on the estate. We've planted over 20,000 trees here over the last 4 years. And so we're, you know, as we know, the trees are the lungs of the planet.
Yes.
And we all need to be planting more of them. But they're very rare to find veteran trees. And these are a great example of that.
Look at this light.
Yeah, great sun.
Oh
great
my
sun.
goodness.
So this is another area here, which is our ponds. So there's the ice house over here. So they dug these ponds to create the ice, to put in the ice house to chill the food, to keep it fresh. So this
And you
is
still
a
have the ice
beautiful
house.
area.
Still got the ice house,
you can see it.
Oh my gosh, it's perfectly in condition now.
Yeah.
It's in pretty good condition. They
Little
always
sort
had
of
a...
Monet-esque Giverny.
This is, what am I looking at down here? What's
So these are two ponds side
oh
by
right,
side.
I see.
And actually there's some beautiful rhododendrons here. There's another gorgeous little area of the garden that you don't necessarily expect. These beautiful buttress walls here,
Oh
which
my
are normally covered in roses.
I
They're
feel
not
like I'm
quite
in like
here
the secret
yet.
garden right now. Oh my goodness.
Amazing.
When I was just viewing that from a top, that's why I thought it was just sort of growing from the earth, but it's clearly coming up from the pond here. This is sensational.
Yeah, it is. So these ponds were meant to be very shallow. So the idea is that they would take off the ice and they would take it into the chamber there. That doorway there, facing there, is always north facing, so it gets the cold air straight into it. When you go into the little channel, there's a big bulb behind it, and then it drops down about 30 feet into that. And what they would do is take layer after layer after a layer of ice off. They'd stack it up all the way up to the top, and then over the winter and through the summer, the ice would gradually melt, and basically it's a Georgian fridge.
Right, it's a Georgian fridge.
Yeah.
This is
Genius.
Genius. Imogen and Darcy have big plans for Constable Burton. They are literally following their dreams.
This part of the Yorkshire Dales is one of the great tourist attractions anyway. When I was growing up here as a little boy, the road that goes at the bottom of the drive there used to have no traffic on it at all. Now it's busy. My father in 1975 started a caravan park, which has been a great little business. And when we came up and we started looking at the estate and seeing what we could do and where we could make our mark, that was a natural place to look towards.
Okay.
Because there was already a business there. We knew that there was enough throughfare, enough business coming up into the area, which we're very lucky about. Although we are still remote, there's still a lot of people who come on their holidays in the Yorkshire. It is a national park.
Yes.
And so we've been in development for the last 4 years on a new tourism business. And we're very excited that it seems to be going in the right direction.
Right.
We're developing 53 lodges.
Oh my goodness. Can I see this area?
Yeah, we'll take you up there to go and have a look at it.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
Oh my goodness, let's head there.
Okay, perfect.
Fantastic. So you were mentioning your legacy project, and is this where we're heading to right now?
This is where we're heading.
Yeah.
So this is super exciting for us. It's been a long journey of discovery, and when we first left London and came up to Yorkshire, so aware of the beauty of where we lived, and we are in this exceptional situation. We're literally on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales National Park. So it's an incredible opportunity as a launch pad for visitors to come and experience this amazing wilderness. And here we are. This is it. This is what we've got our heart set on.
So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a destination so that people can come here from, generally all around the world. We're not buying lodges off the shelf. We've designed these things from the ground up. They are based on the field barns that are up in the Yorkshire Dales. So they're 1, 2 and 3 bedroom units. Okay. And they're going to be really, really spaced out. And this is a big site here. Our caravan park next door, which has got 120 pitches on, is a third smaller than this. So we're actually going to put 53 lodges on there if we get planning permission. We're going to have a lake in here. There's a natural watercourse that goes underneath the ground. We're going to open that up. We're going to have a wild swimming lake. We want to have a yoga space. We want to have various different other catering options up here that we can move around. On an evening like this, you can just feel what it would be like to be up here.
Yeah. Doing some yoga. Doing a swim, and then I might have sort of
the first retreat for me.
Oh, I would love that.
Okay, done.
I mean, yes. I could sort of rent out the entire sort of 53 lodges. How many people I could get? A lot.
A lot.
Could I?
A lot.
Yeah, this will be a sort of groundbreaking development for this part of the world, and we want to make sure that when we do it, we've done it to our very best ability.
Right. And it's also, it sounds like it's sympathetic to the landscape.
100%. So
it's got a lot of natural assets which we're making the most of, in our plans.
Right.
And these modular buildings, they will be bought on site, assembled.
Right.
With a very light touch on the natural environment. We've gone to the utmost lengths to honour and respect this magical place that we live in.
Yeah.
And it is magical. I mean, it's beautiful. I suspect I'm one of the sort of first visitors to be able to.
You've had an insight.
You've got exclusive access.
To see the dream.
To
see the dream.
To see the dream.
Brilliant. Now, I'm just going to ask, we are there's a nice walk, is that right, back to the house?
Yeah, there is. I mean, the house is just on the other side of those trees. We just go up the walk here
and
you're into the park.
Entrance to Constable Burton. So the caravan park gates were the original entrance. This track was part of the driveway, and we'll now snake down, wander through the parkland and approach Constable Burton Hall as you would have
meant
first
to have done,
approached it.
From that picture that we saw
Yes.
before.
Exactly.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How brilliant.
We don't have the horse and cart, but you know, we can pretend.
We'll pretend. I'm going to just imagine.
Yes.
I'm going to go back
Yes.
300 years
Yeah.
Yes.
and imagine walking
Yeah.
back. Yeah?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Yeah, exactly. And look at this.
I know. Amazing.